Okay.
It's recording.
Yaakov? Ethan, you bought the, okay.
It's recording.
Okay, Aaron, you got the,
Can I get through?
yeah. Okay. We're zooming in, yes? Okay, hi, I just want to thank the shave. Okay, I want to thank everyone for coming here tonight. This marks 1 year from when I came home from the hospital for a very serious illness. So I decided that every year on Leil Rishon Shel Chanukah, it will be like a Purim and a Sudat Hodaya. So thank you for coming to this event. So what I wanted to do is just talk a bit about Chanukah. And I'm calling this Devar Torah My Chanukah, which is Aramaic for what is Chanukah. And that's because the one place in the entire Gemara, Talmud Bavli, where Chanukah is mentioned is in Masechet Shabbat. And again, it's a very strange point that this holiday is only mentioned Pam Echad b'Talmud. Now, in the Mishnah, the Chanukah is mentioned actually 6 times, but in passing. But in discussion in the Talmud, in the Gemara, okay, there is only one place where Chanukah is discussed, and that's in Gemara Shabbos. So what I wanted to talk about is, okay, so the question, big question. Okay, it always is interesting to discuss. Well, what is it? Why is it that Chanukah gets so little space in the Talmud? Okay, and the different answers that are giving. But I think what is, and again, so we just mentioned it's in the Gemara. Then it's also mentioned in what's called Megillat Ta'anit. Does anybody know what Megillat Ta'anit is? Megillat Ta'anit, mi yodea? Echad mi yodea? No? No. Megillat Ta'anit was a rabbinic work put together at the end of Tkufat Beit Sheni, at the end of the Second Temple period, and is listed all of the holidays which were observed by the Jewish people in the Second Temple period. And there's a list of 35 Chagim. Now, what's interesting is most of these Chagim don't really have any rituals to it or mitzvot. The only 2 that do are Chanukah and Purim. There are 2 other holidays that are very interesting for us. At least I think so. One is the 7th of Kislev, which is the celebration of the death of Hordus. Okay, King Herod, his death was considered a holiday because he was such a bad guy. So 7th of Kislev was a holiday in commemoration of the death of Hordus HaRasha. Okay, he built this, all the chafirot we see in Caesarea. He's the guy that built it, but when he died, we were happy. The other king whose death we celebrate is that of Yanai HaMelech, who was one of the Chashmonaim, and again, a really bad guy. His holiday is the 2nd day of Shvat, Bet Shvat, Sheniftar. Okay, it's a yortzeit shelo, aval ze chag. It's a low, it's different. We don't say a l'chaim for the neshama, we say thank God they're dead. Very interesting idea. Okay, so Megillat Ta'anit mentions Chanukah, and otherwise, there are no other rabbinic sources from early on that mention Chanukah. Now again, Chanukah is mentioned in the books of the Maccabim, Sifrei Maccabim, but those are historical works that are not rabbinic works. Okay, they're not religious works. But again, interesting history, but it's not something which is of religious significance. So the big question that's asked, and by the way, even in the Gemara, most of the Gemara that is mentioned, most of the text of the Gemara from Masechet Shabbat, the one time where you have a discussion about Hanukkah, much of that Gemara actually is taken from Megillat Ta'anit. Okay, so really, there's really not that much information. So the question is, and many of the Rishonim and Achronim ask, well, why is it that Hanukkah gets so little play? And one of the great answers is that of the Khatam Sofer. Okay, the Khatam Sofer was really the great rabbinic figure of Hungarian Jewry. Khatam Sofer, Shalanu. Okay, our guy.
שהסבא של האבא שלך היה מתכתב איתו.
כן.
הגיוש לבנה.
כן, okay, נכון. That my great grandfather was a Talmud of the Neched Shel Khatam Sofer. Okay, so Khatam Sofer gives a classic answer. He says, why is it that there is so little about Hanukkah the Talmud? So he says, because, again, a very interesting answer. He says, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is the compiler of the Mishnah, correct? And he said, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is from Malchut Beit David. Okay, he's a descendant of Malchut Beit David. He's a descendant of the Beit Hillel, right? He's a descendant of Hillel HaZokain. And the Chashmonaim, what did they do? They were Kohanim, but they took the Keter Malchut, which they should not have done. That's the answer of the Khatam Sofer. So the Khatam Sofer said, because of that, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi didn't really have a Masechta, didn't have anything very much put in the Mishnah about, specifically didn't have a Masechet Chanukah, because of the fact that the Chashmonaim sinned by taking the Keter Malchut. And this is elaborated on, actually, well, the Ramban came first, the Ramban, okay, Rav Moshe ben Nachman. He actually writes about this in his Perush al Torah. And when you have in Parshat Vayechi the bracha given to Yehuda, where it's said that the Malchut goes to Yehuda. Okay, the pasuk is Lo Yosur Shevet Me Yehuda Umechakek Bebein Raglav. So the explanation is that the Malchut is given to the descendants of Yehuda, specifically Malchut Beit David. Okay, so we know that the Malchut. So basically, what the Ramban says is that the Chashmonaim were punished. Okay, he says they did a very big sin by taking the Malchut. He even goes very far. He says that 4 out of the 5 sons. He says that 4 out of the 5 sons of Matidyahu were killed in battle. And he actually said this is a punishment, although I'm not sure why he says that exactly, because, they didn't take the Malchut quite yet. But in any event, if you look at the history of the Chashmonaim, the first of the dynasty that takes the title of king is from the 3rd generation. So you have Matityahu, you have the 5 sons. Shimon is the one son who actually rules Judea. The others die in battle. The others are more short-lived. His oldest son, Aristobulus, great name, Greek name, obviously, he becomes the first who takes the title of king. And he dies soon after, and then his younger brother, Yanai HaMelech, takes the title king also. And what's interesting is that, okay, so you have Shimon Chashmonai, who was a tzaddik. Then you have his son, Yochanan Kohen Gadol. He's called in the Talmud, or they call Josephus Flavius calls him John Hyrcanus. But the Gemara says that Yochanan Kohen Gadol b'sof yamav naseh seduki. Okay? So he already, at the end of his long life, he decided to side with the Tzedukim rather than the Prushim. So already you see problems. And then his sons were already Tzedukim. Okay? And in fact, what's fascinating is that there's an incident told in the Gemara in Masechet Yuma about a Kohen Gadol who refused to do what's called the Nisuch Hamayim on Sukkot. The Nisuch Hamayim is pouring water on the Mizbeach during the festival of Sukkot. Now, this is not mentioned in the Torah, but it's a Kabbalah, and it's considered halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and this is something that the Prushim were big on, but Tzedukim said this was not an appropriate, that this was illegitimate. So the Gemara tells about a Kohen Gadol who refused to do the Nusach Hamayim. He poured the water at his feet, and you know what the people did in response? They threw their etrogim at him. And what happened, again, Josephus recounts the event also, and he mentions that this was Yanai HaMelech, and as a result, there was a civil war. And get the door. As a result, there was a civil war in Judea, and at least 6,000 Jews were slain by Yanai HaMelech. Okay, so he's a pretty bad guy. And it gets so bad that the Jews even have to call the Syrians to help them fight against their ruler. Okay, so you see things are not so good. And not only that, but the Ramban says, he quotes in Gemara Baba Basra, Kol man da omer mi beit Chashmonai ha'itna avdahu. Anybody who says that he is a descendant of Beit Chashmonai is actually a slave. How is this? Because, again, the punishment was that the Chashmonaim will be totally wiped out. And in fact, the only descendants of the Chashmonaim that did survive were those that were the grandchildren of Hordus, who was really originally a slave of Hyrcanus, who was one of the Chashmonaim. So it's very interesting. So the point is that the Ramban is very clear that the Chashmonaim were punished because they refused, because they took the Keter Malchut, which was not theirs. It was for Malchut Beit David. Okay, so if we look at how bad were the Chashmonaim, and I just want to go through, again, I think the Zionist mystique is that Kulanu Maccabim and we're Giborim and all that, but the truth is that if you look at the history of Beit Sheni, except for the first generation or two of the Maccabim, the record is really not that good, and Chazal are not happy with them, not at all. So as an example, okay, so we talked about Yochanan Kohen Gadol. So Yochanan Kohen Gadol becomes a Tzeduki at the end of his life. But also, Yochanan Kohen Gadol does another thing that's very controversial. He forcibly converts pagan peoples around Judea to Judaism. Amongst them were the Idumeans, Bnei Edom. Okay? And that we'll get back to later, but that comes back to bite us later on. Okay? Because Hordus, of course, is from there. Then you have Yanai HaMelech, I mentioned already. And then I'll give another interesting thing. Everyone knows who Choni HaMagol is, right? Choni HaMagol. What's the famous story about Choni HaMagol? How long? Yeah, okay. Well, there's a few famous stories. What about the idea that Choni HaMagol went to sleep for 70 years? Ethan. He was really Rip Van Winkle first. I guess who wrote Rip Van Winkle? But Aaron, you don't know that? He's from near Westchester, Sleepy Hollow. Anyway, but The story of the Gemara is that he fell asleep for 70 years because he saw someone planting a tree and wanted to know when the fruit was going to come. But what's interesting is that in Josephus writes that Choni HaMagal was actually killed by Hyrcanus HaChashmonai because he refused to take sides in the Milchemet HaAchim. And the Marsha asks, is it a stira? So you know what he says? He says that no, it's not a stira, because since he fell asleep for 70 years, they thought that Hyrcanus Hashmonai killed him. Okay, but the point is that the Marsha doesn't say it's, how could this be? He says, mamish, that, these were bad guys. And I think that's people thought that he was killed by Hyrcanus Hashmonai. And again, now we'll get to the Milchemet HaAchim, which some people know about. So there was only one ruler from the Hashmonaim who was considered to be on the side of Chazal. Does anyone know who that was? There's a street named after her in this town. Thank you. Of course, somebody had to know that. Okay, so she's the only one from the whole Chevra who's considered good. And who is her brother? Shimon ben Shetach. Okay, so here, after her beloved husband leaves the earth, and we have a yontif in honor, Megillat Tani says, Bet Shvat is Yom Tov Sheniftar Yanai HaMelech. Okay, so Shalom Tzion HaMalka is now the queen, but her top advisor is Shimon ben Shetach, who's her brother, who is the head of the Sanhedrin. Okay, and this is the golden era for Judea, for Yehuda during the period of Bayit Sheni. Okay, however, when she dies, her two sons, Hyrcanus and Aristobulus, good Yiddish names, right? They have a war against each other. And what does each do? And again, it's interesting because you could look at things that are happening today and you can make your own conclusions. So each side decided that they need external help. So who do they call to help? The superpower of the day, which is Rome. Greece is gone already. Okay, now we're at Rome. So Pompey the Great, that's what the historians call him. He comes from Syria, marches into Yerushalayim, and he walks into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That's how bad he was. And he walks into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and he defiles the Parochet and so on. This was a terrible thing, but he brought Rome into Yerushalayim, and he came in on the side of Hyrcanus, and they took Aristobulus, the younger brother, to Rome in chains. And in fact, the Ramban in his Perush HaTorah talks about, in the Tochacha, he talks about a king using the pasuk. Let me get the pasuk exactly. Okay. Yolech Adonai otcha ve'et malkecha asher takim alecha el goy asher lo yodata. Ata v'avotecha v'avata shem elokim acherim eitz ve'eben. So the Ramban says that you're a king in Bayit Sheni is going to be brought to a land far away. And the Ramban said this, he actually says it's either referring to Aristobulus, Hashmonai, who was brought in chains to Rome as a defeated king and was mocked in Rome. Then he says the other opinion is that this is Agrippus Hasheni, because Agrippus Hasheni was the king of Judea during the Mered Hagadol, which culminates in the Churban Bayit Sheni, and Agrippus Hasheni is in Rome during part of the war, and actually is siding with Rome against his own people. Okay, got that one? And not only that, but the girlfriend of Titus HaRasha is, who knows, the sister of Agrippus Hasheni. Okay? So we think only today we have crazy self-hating Jews. We had them then too. And they could be important Jews too. So this is all part of the Gestalt, which is very sad. So again, you know, the Ramban Ramban really focuses on the idea of Maseh Avot Siman Labanim, and how all of this is foretold in not only in the Tochacha, but all of the stories about the Avot v'Imahot. Okay, so I think it's all very important. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so I just want to give another interesting point. So, in rabbinic literature, Chazal always refer to Rome as Edom, right? Anybody ever think why? Why?
It's not the same region.
It's not even close. But why? Why is Rome Edom? Because what we know historically is Yochanan Kohen Gadol conquers Edom, and he makes them become Jews. And amongst those who were forcibly brought into Judaism was the father, the father of Hordus HaRasha, Antipater, who then becomes the chief advisor to Hyrcanus Chashmonai, and he is the architect of getting Rome into Yerushalayim to side with his client. Okay? So what happens, and again, I think it's very interesting because what you have is that Rome is brought in by the Edomians, by Edom, who we brought into our camp, and they, again, Antipater, and not only that, but his son, isn't that amazing? And then his son Hordus, again, this is a very interesting thing since we live near Caesarea, which was established by Hordus HaRasha in honor of who? Who is it named after? Caesarea. Which Caesar? Lo. The best buddy. Okay, how do you say? Chaver Achito Ba'olam. Okay, how did they say in English? Best bud? Best friend. BF, what's it? BFF. Okay. Hordus's BFF from school in Rome, because he got educated in Rome, was none other than Octavian Caesar, who becomes the first Caesar of Rome. Okay? So when his buddy Octavian becomes the Caesar, what does he do? He decides to appoint his best buddy to be Hamelech Shel Yehuda. Okay? Isn't that amazing? And what does he do? What does he do? Come. What does he do? He makes his best friend Melech Shel Yehuda. Get yours. And what does Hordus do in honor of his best friend when he becomes king? He builds a city in his honor. And the city he builds is Caesarea. And it has the best port in the whole Eastern Mediterranean Sea. And again, I think people have to understand. So when we talk about Rome, Edom, it's not just a nice idea, but there's actually a kesher between Hordus, who's an Edomian, and Rome, and his father, who was the one who actually helped bring the Romans into Yerushalayim to begin with. And again, we know what happens at the end. They destroy the Beit HaMikdash. So I think what I wanted to really do here tonight is give a little background to why Hanukkah doesn't get much play in the Talmud and in the Mishnah, And I think it's very important for us, especially by Yamim Hahem Bazman Hazeh, while we celebrate the Nisim v'Niflaot of the Pach Shemen, we also have to understand that much of the history of Bayit Sheni is not, in other words, Bayit Sheni is a period where the Jews are under occupation most of the time. There's only 100 years they are independent, which is under the Chashmonaim. And under the Chashmonaim, things are not as good as we like to think. And I think that when we look at our matzav now, if I could just make a little comparison, lahavdil, but I think we have to understand that Jewish government in of itself isn't always a solution, but we have to have leaders that understand and care about our values. And in fact, in halacha, we have a division between the Kohanim and between the Melech. In other words, to use political philosophy terminology, there's a division of powers. Right? Division of powers. And when you combine them, that isn't good. And perhaps here, we should have division of powers here as well, in some way. But again, we have to really think what we do, how are we to make sure that the Medina is on the right track, and that we understand that also calling the superpower for assistance all the time isn't necessarily a good thing. And that's what we learned from history. So while the superpower can be helpful, but we can't be totally reliant on it. So I'm going to stop here. Anybody have any questions or comments? And thank you for all those that came, and I didn't say hi to you.
Sorry, we shut up late. Can you start over?
Oh, I'd love to, but we have it on tape, so you can see it on tape. But anyways, everybody, why don't everybody just say who they are so all the people on Zoom could know, okay? Yechiam, why don't you start?
Yechiam Shapira. 25 years in Pardes Chana. Previous to that, I was born in Tirat Tzvi, in kibbutz, nearby the Jordan River. I'm a fish biologist, very common, I guess.
Very common, sure. Okay, Vatsana.
צמח מורי מפרדס חנה, רק 40 שנה פה.
40 שנה, אוקיי. זה לא מדבר.
אוהב את לני, אז באתי לכאן.
תודה. Hi. I want to thank everyone who participated and has an interest in the Sudat Hodaya for my 1-year anniversary from leaving the hospital. I just want to wish everyone a Chag Sameach and a Shabbat Shalom. Thank you all.